I'm Anthony Wright, and I'm your co-host today on the Living Conversation with.
Adam Dietz.
And before the break, Adam, you were talking about, and this is chapter 80 in the Tao Te Ching.
That sounds right to me, yeah.
And please talk about it again about if you said that the people in the village had sharp tools, but they were only on display, and the carriages were left in the garage. Why? Why?
Sharp tools shows you have to do some competing, sorry, sharp weapons, right?
Weapons. Oh,
You have
okay.
to fight, you have to compete, you have to steal, take, fight, grab.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I should say weapons. Maybe I forget if I made a mistake earlier too. So sharp weapons.
Okay.
So yes, they have skill. They have a sharp weapon. They have ability. Don't need it. Their life is very simple. They don't need this weapon. It's just on display in their home.
Well, isn't it say earlier that when weapons are used, sharp weapons always become dull.
A
But if they're
different
not used, they remain sharp, right?
A different chapter, what I remember about weapon analogy, and it also comes up in class often, the different analogy about weapon is if you hone your weapon too finely, it will become brittle. That's the one I remember. Uh,
Oh, right.
Maybe you're remembering something else?
No, no, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's
So
exactly right. So with the sharp weapons just on display, their brittleness is set aside. So
yeah,
there's
but
flexibility.
most importantly, it shows that they don't fight, they don't compete. They just are content. They're content. They don't have to go out and conquer. They're happy in their own village, in their own home, in their own simplicity. Hmm? Same with they have fancy carriages. They don't need to go anywhere. They have a fancy carriage. They could go wherever they want. They could show this carriage. They could go do trading, get new goods, fancy things, learn more about the outside world, but actually they're content. They don't need to. They even can hear the neighboring village just over the mountain. You can
Right.
hear the neighbor's rooster. You can hear the neighbor's dog, but they don't, their whole life, they don't need to leave their own village, their own valley, and they can still learn the Tao.
Because the Tao is everywhere.
Hmm.
I was walking on campus, listening to Alan Watts, and uh, it would be a thing like the Tao is everywhere, but it's a pity to say so, right? Because the Tao is not something that we can talk about. I mean, we're talking about it, but it is not something that is actually expressible with language or even thinking. Would you say that's true?
Yes, yes. And this is a big challenge for students. I don't know if we talked about this before in the radio show podcast. A big challenge for some students that are trained to dictate when people are indicate, find out, discover when people are BSing them. And they want to use good critical thinking to watch out for certain, online debaters and
Right.
catch them in their word games and catch them for their BS. So some students in philosophy, they took philosophy to hone this skill.
And that's a useful thing,
Very useful. And we teach it in our class. It's very important.
right?
There's certain people you listen to in 1 minute, like Socrates. You could be channel your inner Socrates. You listen to a person for 1 minute and you realize if I'm using reason and logic, they're completely full of it and they're manipulating me.
Uh-huh.
That's one side of the coin. That's how these students were trained. So when they first hear Lao Tzu or Alan Watts channeling Lao Tzu talk about how the Tao is beyond words, they say, "Oh, this is just like cop out, just trying to trick me. They can say Tao is beyond words. Now they can say whatever they want. I have to listen to them like a guru cult leader." They have this cynicism, and it is good, valid, important, and very important. Yeah, we don't want to go to some cult. No, good. Keep your critical thinking. But Eastern philosophy doesn't care. Doesn't care if you want to, if Lao Tzu, for example, if you want to learn Tao, then you learn Tao. If you don't want to listen to him, he doesn't care. That's your journey. That's your path. So when some students pointed this out, I write about this in my manuscript, but I return to Heinrich Zimmer, Philosophies of India. And
Okay.
Heinrich Zimmer illuminates that Eastern philosophy, they want you to experience enlightenment for yourself, to experience it.
Yeah.
The words are just to help you get there. If you get there, excellent, your path. And Heinrich Zimmer uses the image like we are all lotuses. Some are very close to the mud where we're just starting to sprout and come up. Others are very close to the surface. This is like enlightenment. We're just starting to, maybe in one moment, we could become enlightened. Where the lotus is coming up to the top of the surface to bloom. A beautiful flower is like some people's mind is very close to enlightenment. They could hear Lao Tzu's words. They could hear a Zen koan. They could be like Hui Neng, the founder of Zen Buddhism. We could talk about a different time, but
Yep.
they hear one phrase from a Diamond Sutra, hear one word from a passing monk, and become instantly enlightened. That's where some minds are. So to use this to speak to people who are stuck in a logic brain, in thinking brain, which is okay, which is important, of course, but it's not everything. In Eastern philosophy, they often try to say, I want to point you to Tao or to enlightenment, and you go experience it.
Right.
And if you go experience it, you are enriched. If you want to scoff and not look at it, that's your own business.
Right. Right. I'm reminded, and I know I've told you this story, not necessarily on this broadcast before, but um, a number of years ago, there was a Christian acquaintance of mine who came to me and he said, Anthony, you're so spiritual. He was an evangelical. And he said, Anthony, you're so spiritual. How can you be so spiritual and not be Christian? And I went, well, okay. He says, how do you do that? I said, I study Buddhism and Taoism. And he said, well, tell me about Buddhism. And I thought about the Diamond Sutra, where Buddha is giving his talk. And I come back actually in my classes to talk about, well, what is Buddha? And the root word of Buddha is Bud, which is to awaken. And it's different than this idea of wokeness that's being passed around now, right? But it's to awaken to what? To what what we actually are. And but coming back to the Diamond Sutra, I thought about there's a point in the text. Buddha is talking with his disciple Subhuti, and Subhuti said, "Oh Lord Buddha, your merit is greater than all the numerous grains of sand in the Ganges." And Buddha said, "Just so, Subhuti, but that's only a way of talking about it." And so I came back to my Christian acquaintance and I said, "Well, I had a mind worm for him, and for all of you guys who are and ladies who are listening." Um, uh, I said, what Subhuti was talking about, or what the Buddha had related to Subhuti, was basically, if you can think of it, it's already too small. So it's the idea of our thoughts reduce our experience from what it actually is. And my acquaintance kept thinking about it. And the more that he thought about it, the more that he kept getting tossed out of his thinking. And he came back to me and he said he got to know God better because he wasn't
Mm,
trying to put God in a box, which I
good.
was very grateful for.
Yes.
But um and it's this idea about, I write a thing, I've written an article where I say that I think we have enlightenment every day,
Mm,
but we don't value it
mm,
in our culture.
mm,
And what that enlightenment is, and I talk to my students about this and say, when was the last time, and as a soccer coach, you're going to be aware of this, when was the last time that you were doing something you loved and you forgot all about yourself,
mm, mm,
right? And it's like uh, in a sports analogy, it's about when people are in the zone. When you're in the zone, there isn't any separated you. And to me, I mean, that's part of uh, what Chuang-Tzu talked about in Confucius having a conversation with the guy that wanted to go to the next province. Um, and Chuang-Tzu, Confucius said, fast the mind, no fast the self, and forget the self. Um, and there's a Buddhist text to say to study the Buddha way is to forget the self. Um, and to forget the self is to become one with the 10,000 things, which is reality. Um, and it comes back to this the old joke of the Buddhist hot dog vendor about make me one with everything, you know. Uh, but I think, and I'd like to invite everybody who's listening to this to just contemplate, think about when you have forgotten yourself, and what would it be like to do that all the time? And so this is an idea about Csikszentmihalyi, who is a American psychologist who's written about the flow state, and I think that's also what enlightenment is, what the Tao is. I mean, in the flow state. What do you think about that?
Oh, you said a lot. You said a
Yeah, I
lot.
know, man.
The first thing that comes to mind is you were discussing evangelical Christian,
Yep,
and you were able to make a connection through Buddhist and Taoist philosophy.
yep.
This reminds me a little bit of a book that my undergrad teacher Howard Muller recommended to me a long time ago. It was called, and I only flipped through it because it didn't become my focus, but it was called The Transcendent Unity of Religion by Frithjof Schuon.
Oh, I want to write that down.
And
Okay.
this actually, if you think of a prism, it's that at the very top of the prism, or if I'm thinking of prism the right way, but at the very top you have the light. So
Hmm.
the highest level of religion, very similar, almost identical. They have seen the highest level, mystical experience, transcendent experience,
It's beyond language,
beyond language. Exactly, beyond
beyond
language.
even thinking.
Yeah, beyond even thinking, because you're talking about the thinking is too small.
Right, right.
Alan Watts, there's another point. Alan Watts mentioned this is that's like our thinking is like a strobe light versus a floodlight. Sorry, not a strobe light, like a flashlight
Spotlight.
versus a spotlight versus a
Versus
floodlight.
spotlight. Yeah,
So this is like your thinking is your logical thinking, your linear thinking is just bit by bit, letter by letter, word by word, looking, searching, searching, putting little bits
yeah.
together. Whereas you actually have an entire mind, an entire being, which is beyond that. So when you say if you could think about it, it's too small, it's because that thinking mind is just one part of us. The
Right.
the
Yep.
enlightenment experience is that you now realize you are not just only your thinking. That's part of an enlightenment experience. So when people have had this experience in their whichever religion, it's like in Hinduism, they talk about there are as many paths to the one as there are people on this earth.
Yes.
So in any religion are just a few of the paths that people have chosen. And in these religions, if you reach the highest level, you have a very similar, almost identical insight, mystical experience, transcendent experience with other people.
Yep.
Now, people who are at a lower level of their religion, they begin to see it more like the prisms of light, right? The way a prism works, that the light begins to separate out into various colors. So that's what Frithjof Schuon talks about in this transcendent unity of religion. So people at the lowest level of the religion, they see it so differentiated that they
Right.
actually maybe even fight, maybe even cause trouble, or maybe even tell you, Anthony, how can you be spiritual if you didn't look at my light, my color? Right?
Right. Right. We have to take a short break. I'm Anthony Wright with my co-host,
Adam Dietz.
and we'll take a short break and be right back. So stay tuned.
I'm Adam Dietz, and you can contact me at dietzadam@gmail.com, Dietz Adam at gmail.com, or if you prefer and you're active on Instagram, I'm at the dot way between on Instagram. I'm also on Substack, the way between. That's on Substack. That's where almost everything will be filtered through on Substack. You can also search us up on YouTube, but I think those are the best avenues, those first three. So I really appreciate everyone chiming in. Please give us any information that you have about how you've been able to protect yourself, cultivate yourself, grow, flourish in these times.
And I'm Anthony Wright, and my website is theonaut, theonaut.com. And it's A as in Apple, S as in Sam, W as in William, numeral 2, N as in Nora, R as in Robert. I'll say that again, ASW2NR at theonaut.com, or you can make a comment directly on my website.